There are buildings that say more about their creators than any political manifesto or official press release ever could. There are places that scream by remaining silent. The Ryugyong Hotel in Pyongyang is exactly such a place. A concrete pyramid rising 155 meters above the skyline of North Korea's capital, visible from almost every corner of the city, and yet for long decades completely non-existent in the official flow of information. For years, it did not appear on tourist maps. It was not listed in propaganda brochures. It was not photographed by official photojournalists. It stood there, huge, empty, and silent, like the shadow of a shameful secret that no one had the right to name directly, yet that every Pyongyang resident saw every day when leaving home. The history of Ryugyong begins in the mid-1980s, at a time when North Korea was experiencing one of its rare moments of geopolitical economic mobilization. Kim Il-sung, wanting to demonstrate to the world the might of the Socialist Republic, commissioned the construction of a hotel complex that was meant to be the largest and tallest hotel on Earth. The project was a direct response to South Korea's success as it prepared to host the Olympic Games in Seoul in 1988 and built its image as a modern, dynamic state. Pyongyang, constantly competing with Seoul for symbolic dominance on the Korean peninsula, decided to answer with its own grand vision. And that vision took the form of 618 rooms, 42 floors reserved for the hotel section, 5 revolving restaurants at the top, and a pyramidal conical silhouette that was meant to become an icon of the new socialist architecture. Construction officially began in 1987, with pomp and ceremony befitting the scale of the project. Propaganda announced that the structure would be completed for the Day of the Sun in 1989, which would have been a symbolic birthday gift for Kim Il-sung. The deadline passed without any opening ceremony. Construction continued. New dates were announced, 1990, then 1992. Each of those deadlines was quietly postponed, and the official silence around the delays became louder and louder in what it said. The propaganda apparatus, which could spend hours extolling every industrial success and every ton of steel smelted by heroic workers, had nothing to say about the building standing in the very center of the capital, clearly visible from the windows of government buildings. The technical problems that halted construction were fundamental in the literal sense of the word. Engineers discovered that the quality of the concrete used in the structure fell short of the required standards in a way that could threaten the stability of the entire structure under certain seismic and load conditions. North Korea did not then possess either the technology to precisely produce high-grade concrete for a building of that height, or access to Western construction technologies, because sanctions and ideological isolation restricted imports. Some sources also point to problems with cranes. North Korean construction machinery was not adapted to work at such heights, and purchasing Western equipment required foreign currency, which the regime did not have in sufficient quantity. Construction stopped in 1992 and was to remain so for 16 years. 16 years standing without a roof, without windows, and without any finishing work in a climate where winters can be freezing and summers rainy did its work on the concrete structure. Construction experts who analyzed satellite images and smuggled photographs from North Korea assessed that after such a period of neglect, the interior of the building must have suffered serious damage due to water infiltration, freeze-thaw cycles, and the complete lack of maintenance. The question of whether the building could ever be finished and safely operated became increasingly rhetorical. Yet for the regime, Ryugyong was above all an image problem, not a technical one. The embarrassment of the Ryugyong Hotel reached its peak in 1999, when the North Korean National Atlas issued for internal use, and therefore a document that did not need to account for outside verification, simply omitted the building from the map of central Pyongyang. A 155-meter structure dominating the entire city was removed from the cartographic record of reality, with the same ideological precision with which the regime erased disliked officials from photographs after their fall. It is one of the most suggestive examples of what totalitarian control over information is. It is not just about censoring facts, but about censoring physical space itself, about declaring that something standing before your eyes simply does not exist. The Western world learned about the Ryugyong Hotel mainly through satellite images and reports from diplomats who, in the 1990s, began to describe more and more boldly what they saw in Pyongyang. In 1997, Esquire published an article calling Ryugyong the worst building in the world. not because it was ugly in the conventional sense, but because it embodied all the pathologies of the system that created it: megalomania, incompetence, disregard for human and economic costs, and above all the ability to create a fiction so dense that the regime itself began to believe it. That article was widely quoted by Western media and became the first mass exposure of the public outside Korea to the building. The turnaround came in 2008, when North Korea announced the resumption of construction work. The information appeared in the official media. For the first time in 16 years, the pyramid existed officially. The work progressed visibly and quickly. Within a few years, glass cladding appeared on the exterior walls of the building, radically changing Ryugyong's silhouette. The raw gray concrete pyramid turned into a gleaming silver-blue structure, whose facade reflected the Pyongyang sky and gave a certain illusion of modernity. The exterior work was largely completed by 2016, which meant that after nearly 30 years since construction began, the building for the first time presented itself as finished on the outside, though inside there was still nothing but a concrete shell. The matter of the interior is a separate chapter in this story. Although the facade was finished, no reliable source has confirmed that even a single guest ever stayed in the hotel. There is no photograph of the lobby, a room, a restaurant, or any other space inside the building. Foreign diplomats accredited in Pyongyang, when asked whether anyone in their circle had visited the interior, consistently answer no. No defector has described the interior of Ryugyong from personal experience, because apparently none of those who escaped ever went inside. The building, though glass-clad on the outside, remains as inaccessible as it was when it stood bare and gray. Only the costume changed, not the essence. The cost of building Ryugyong is one of those numbers where any attempt at precision is an illusion, because North Korea does not publish reliable economic data. Estimates by outside analysts indicate that the construction phase of the 1980s alone consumed an amount equal to between 2 and 3% of North Korea's then gross domestic product. By comparison, if the United States were to decide to build a facility consuming a similar share of its economy, the cost would amount to hundreds of billions of dollars. The work resumed after 2008 was partially financed by the Egyptian company Orascom Telecom, which in exchange for the right to operate the Koryolink mobile network in North Korea, agreed to share in the construction costs. This arrangement, giving up part of the telecommunications market in exchange for financing a hotel that still was not open, is a peculiar illustration of the regime's priorities, where external image matters more than functionality. Ryugyong's height, 155 meters to the top of the tower, placed it for years among the 50 tallest buildings in the world, though that classification was disputed, because some rankings refused it a place as a building that had never been inhabited or operated. The number of floors is 105, although only 42 were originally intended to be usable, with the rest meant to be technical and reception areas. The design included 5 revolving restaurants on the upper levels, an idea that, in the era when the CN Tower in Toronto or the World Trade Center towers in New York were being built, sounded modern and aspirational, but in the context of North Korea's technical capabilities, was a boldness closer to fantasy than engineering planning. The symbolism of Ryugyong is multi-layered, and each layer says something different about the system that created it. First, it is a monument to megalomania, the belief that size and spectacle of form can replace substance and usefulness. Second, it is proof that in a totalitarian system, no project can be officially abandoned, because admitting failure is impossible. Instead, the project is frozen, left unmentioned, and then resumed as if nothing had happened. Third, it is a case study in what economists and organizational theorists call escalation of commitment, the phenomenon in which more and more resources are poured into a project doomed to fail, simply because the costs already incurred are too large to admit publicly. Fourth and finally, it is an architectural proof of the gulf between ambition and execution capacity, a gulf that runs through the entire economy and the entire politics of North Korea, like an invisible yet omnipresent dividing line. Over the past few years, large LED screens have appeared on the top of Ryugyong broadcasting propaganda content. Images of Kim Jong-un, party slogans, and staged shots of happy Korean families. These screens, visible at night from all over Pyongyang, as bright patches in the darkness, because the city still suffers from chronic electricity shortages, are the latest chapter in the building's history so far. A hotel without rooms, without guests, and without a reception has become a giant billboard, a projection screen for the ideology that built it, and that is too proud to tear it down, too poor to finish it, and too cunning to keep silent about it for 16 years. Today, Ryugyong exists as one of those phenomena that escape simple categories. It is not a ruin because it was never fully built. It is not a museum because nobody goes inside it. It is not a symbol of collapse because the regime still invests in its facade. It is something more complex, a material expression of the contradictions of a system that lives in the space between declaration and reality, between what it shows the world and what really exists. For the residents of Pyongyang, it has simply become part of the landscape, as natural and unavoidable as the mountains on the horizon, and just as inaccessible and mute. For the rest of the world, it remains the best concrete argument for the claim that architecture is politics embodied in stone, or in this case, in concrete and a sheet of reflective glass. Click the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications.